How and exactly why does pleasure make us miserable? Well, there's a simple reason behind it, but first of all, I gotta explain to you the two types of pleasure because there are two main types of pleasure. And in this video, I'm gonna be talking about exactly one, which is wrecking you from the inside. So for the first type, we have the real pleasure, which is basically delayed gratification. And what I mean by this are the habits that you gain pleasure long term. And a good instance I can give you is building good relationship or pursuing your goals. And the second type of pleasure is, of course, the fake one. And the fake one, by all means, it's always going to be instant gratification. And the activities that you can gain this fake pleasure from are basically things like drinking, smoking, partying, clubbing, watching porn, masturbating, and so on. So why do I call this fake pleasure? Well, it's simply because these habits, at first glance, they seem really good and pleasurable, right? But no, and you can 100% relate to me here that every single time you do them, you feel even worse afterwards. And sadly for us, we've been sold this idea that having fun is actually doing these bad activities I just mentioned to you. So how is this type 2 of pleasure quietly making us feel miserable? Well, there's actually a mechanism behind it which is linked to dopamine. And first of all, you've most probably heard that dopamine is the chemical of pleasure, which is not true, because actually dopamine is the chemical of motivation. And when you have high levels of dopamine, you basically feel motivated and driven as fuck to do certain things. So now I will explain to you why you feel worse after doing these habits and why this whole thing is linked to your levels of dopamine. So hear me out. Initially, you will have a baseline of dopamine, right? And as you think of doing that pleasurable habit, your dopamine level slowly and gradually starts to build up just like this. And also, while you actually do the habit, you will experience something called a dopamine spike, which is basically that your dopamine levels skyrocket, just like this. And you will reach a certain point when you stop doing the actual habit, and you will experience something called having a dopamine crash. So your dopamine level will start to crash down just like this into a new baseline. But here's the problem, if you have noticed, your new baseline is actually below your previous one, and that's why you feel worse, because when you were sitting at your initial baseline, you had some sort of level of drive and motivation and so on. You're feeling fine, right? But now, after you crash down and after you did that habit, your new baseline makes you feel even worse because it's below your level of dopamine is below your previous one. That's why you feel more unmotivated and undriven. And eventually, if you keep seeking this fake pleasure over and over again, you will inevitably experience something that I call the cycle of misery. And why do I call it the cycle of misery? Well, it's simply because when you're feeling down after doing these pleasurable habits and you feel like shit, you want to seek like real pleasure, you want to feel good, right? And you basically want to escape your negative emotions. But here's the problem. You want to seek this pleasure as fast as possible, like without really considering the consequences that come with it. So again, you will start seeking instant gratification because, like, yeah, you will gain some pleasure from it, but it will last like just a couple of minutes or even seconds, and you will feel like shit afterwards. So that's why I call it the cycle of misery. It's because you constantly seek this pleasure, and every single time after you do these habits, you feel worse and worse and worse, and you tend towards misery. So now I will break down how does this cycle exactly work and how does it occur. So now let's say, for instance, you just jerked off and you feel like shit. And how do you exactly escape your negative emotion that you are currently experiencing without thinking about the consequences? Because if you are being honest, you don't really think about them. You just want to feel good as fast as possible, no matter what. So what do we do? Well, of course, you will seek more instant gratification. And for example, now you can cheat on your diet, you can eat junk food or something. And when you do it, you'll get that dopamine rush, that dopamine spike I just mentioned to you earlier. and you will feel good for a couple of minutes or seconds. And then your baseline will crash down even more, and then you will feel worse than even before. And then now you will seek instant gratification over and over again, and your baseline goes lower and lower and lower as you do it, and that's why you feel worse and worse and worse. So how the fuck do we break the cycle? Well, there's a simple and a practical reason to it. And if you remember when I talked about lowering your baseline and feeling worse and worse and worse as you progressively seek instant gratification, there's also an opposite side to it. Like when you do good habits, like, I don't know, reading, journaling, working out, cold approaching, working, and so on, your baseline goes up and up and up, and you feel better and better and better while doing it. Like now, I'm gonna do the same analogy I did with the fake pleasurable habits, but now with the good habits. So here's your initial baseline, right? And as you think about doing that good habit and actually doing it, again, your dopamine level gradually rise. And again, you will reach a certain point when you will stop doing that good habit, and your dopamine level will crash down again. But watch out what happens. Your new baseline is above the initial one. So here was your initial baseline of dopamine levels, and here's your new one. And that's why you feel better than before, because your new baseline is above the previous one, and your levels of dopamine are higher, and you feel more driven and motivated to do certain things. So interestingly enough, this is how you can actually break free. If you are currently finding yourself being down and unmotivated as fuck, and you want to seek pleasure, like the real pleasure, this is how you basically do it. And the final verdict would be, once you actually understand how dopamine works and how it affects your mood and everything, it will be quite easy to reverse engineer your way out of this cycle. So if you want to break free and don't feel like shit, just trust me, and I promise you, if you do even one good habit, you will feel completely different and better. Trust me. And if you stack up 2, 3, or even 5, you can change your day entirely, from being this down in terms of motivation and drive to here being driven, fulfilled, and actually happy. Alright, I think that's it with this video. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.